And thank you to the Solicitor General for that answer. I'd also like to thank the Solicitor General, as we did have a meeting at the end of the last sitting around this proposal, as well as my engagement with the Minister for Home Affairs, Leon, the Chief Minister, as well as my fellow backbenchers who brought their amendments, as well as the Children's Commissioner. The Children's Commissioner and the Solicitor General obviously point out the issue that I had inadvertently created and why that I have actually had to bring my own amendment to remove the over 18s part of this proposition. It's very difficult in trying to balance the rights and the wrongs without sending out the wrong message out into the public, especially when it comes to young people. But my question still remains at the end of this proposition is, do we still believe that criminalising people for the personal use of cannabis is the right thing to do? So why did I bring this proposition in this first place? It was the intention of the previous government, with the previous Home Affairs Minister, to have an in-committee debate around cannabis, because the world's view on the subject is changing, and we should be considering changing with it. Unfortunately, with the change of government and the new Home Affairs Minister, this in-committee debate was no longer going to take place, as this was not one of her priorities. So I thought I could have brought an in-committee debate myself, and we could have all discussed it, but there'd have been no vote at the end to actually give a direction to government for what we want to see change and how we want things to change with it. There's a satirical quote that goes around, and it's either around the definition of stupidity or the definition of insanity. Either way, it's about doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Jersey criminalised cannabis in the 1960s. So here we are, 60 years later, still criminalising people, but nothing's changed. People still use cannabis daily. But what has changed is the way that government deals with substance use and substance use within our society. We've changed to a harm reduction strategy, which means that we have to accept that people will use substances, and actually to offer them support when they need it is the best way to get them off substances rather than criminalising them. This is work that has been based on very eminent psychologists, the likes of Gabor Mate, a Canadian-Hungarian who's done a lot of work around addiction. I found it quite difficult with the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs letter, because what that letter stated was going very much against the strategy the government brought forward last year. So to me, it seems there are still elements that are at odds with strategies and enforcement. So how big is the problem of cannabis convictions and interactions with the police? I think it's fair to say at the moment that there is nobody who is in prison and has been charged for the personal possession of cannabis alone. These crimes and convictions are normally associated with more serious offences, which ends up with someone in prison. However, the people who are being arrested, cautioned, forced to go to a parish hall inquiry, are still being exposed to our law enforcement and our judicial system. Rightly or wrongly, these people can end up at a parish hall inquiry and receiving a £200 fine for possession of 15 grams of cannabis. This is still considered a form of decriminalisation, but the £200 fine and the appearance at parish hall inquiry makes it a decriminalised act with civil sanctions. This is still a type of conviction, and it would still appear on an enhanced DBS check. So anybody who does this in their youth, over the age of 18, but then may wish to go into teacher training, would actually be barred from teaching a school because they'd have a conviction for drugs. So what this proposition seeks is to take this form of decriminalisation to the next step, and by removing the involvement of the police for a limited amount of personal possession. Policing of cannabis now has become very, very difficult because we've legalised the use of medicinal cannabis, which means that somebody who has a prescription is allowed to carry their full prescription around with them at all times and would be able to use their prescription in the time that they wish to use it. The problem for the police is now they're not allowed to ask an individual if they have a prescription until the point that they believe an offence has been occurred and a caution has been written. At that point, the person should then declare whether or not they have a prescription. If they can't prove that they have a prescription at that point, the police have to seize their cannabis, tag it for the person who it has been removed from, hold it, and then return it if a prescription is presented. If a prescription is not presented, it then has to be analysed to confirm that it is cannabis, and then after that fact, they would then have to decide whether charges should be brought. Another interesting problem that the police will face is if somebody is smoking cannabis in a public space with a prescription, the police have to know before they charge the person what offence is actually being committed. Because if you have a prescription, you are not using an illegal substance in a public space. You are misusing a prescription, which is a different offence to what you can be charged for. So this makes action for the police very, very difficult. It's also very costly. It leads to a lot of financial with the analysis of the substance, whether it turns out to be cannabis or not. But mostly, it's about time. We have very limited police resources, and for many people, this is a very small action, a small crime. So why are we wasting so much time on it? Some might say that the answer is, well, why don't we toughen up how prescribed cannabis is used? Well, the problem with that is we don't impose other restrictions on other medications. If somebody's taking ADHD medication, or if somebody has to inject a medication at varying intervals, we would not tell them when and where they can use their prescriptions. Having conversations with some frontline police officers, they said, well, some of the biggest problems they have are at outdoor events, where someone might take a large quantity of their prescription, but of course, if they have their prescription with them, as in the note from the doctor that says they are allowed to have prescribed cannabis, this cannot be removed from them, even though they know they're there probably for the wrong reasons. However, if we were to make an acceptable allowance for what people are allowed to carry on them, on their person, this would clear this action up, especially for the police. That if somebody is carrying far too much on them at one time, that the police know they can either just ignore it, let that person move on their way, although if that person is under the age of 18 or can't prove that they're over the age of 18, they would still be allowed to remove the cannabis from them, as they would not legally have a prescription. It seems that cannabis is becoming more of an administrative burden and a drain on our police resources than the impact that it'll actually have on society. For a little bit of context, I remembered the 2000 Euros football championships, where it was jointly shared by the Netherlands and Belgium. Belgium famous for its beer, the Netherlands famous for something else. With the crowd trouble that erupted at that football tournament, the majority of the trouble actually happened in Belgium. This year, we've seen the Euros taking place in Germany, a country which has recently legalized the recreational use and possession of cannabis. Not decriminalized, legalized. There is a difference. The German government and people of the German towns are actually encouraging travelling supporters to use cannabis, as they are aware it will create less crowd trouble than if people were drinking to excess. The Misuse of Drugs Advisory Council's letter mentioned the UN Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. So I feel it is important to mention that the following countries are all signatories to this convention. All have decriminalised cannabis so that there are no sanctions at all. These countries are Belize, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Jamaica, Luxembourg, Malta, Mexico, the Netherlands, Peru, Poland, Portugal, South Africa, Spain, Switzerland, and Uruguay. A number of countries have taken different actions to cannabis, which includes decriminalisation, but still with civil sanctions. However, there are countries with some form of legalisation. Germany, most notably Canada, and 26 states within the United States. The convention allows the sovereignty of its signatory nations. It allows these countries to decide their own rules on punishing people for possession within their own countries. So when the letter mentioned about the issues with our nearest neighbours, mainly France, I found an interesting one. We have no land borders with France. We have no freedom of movements within France. We're only a small market for the illegal trade that already exists. So given that they share a land border with Spain, Germany, Luxembourg, Switzerland, all these countries have free movement of peoples and, most importantly, free movement of goods. There are no checks on anything that be travelling around these countries, and yet France has not posted an objection to any of these countries. We have an illegal market in Jersey. Let's be real about this. We share good intelligence with France and the UK, and I cannot see any reason why this wouldn't continue. Now here comes one of the tricky parts with cannabis, and that's mental health. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that there is a connection between mental health and cannabis use, because cannabis psychosis is a thing, and it is something that I have witnessed firsthand. Now, it doesn't affect everybody, and those people who are affected by cannabis psychosis, it can be very impactful, and the effects are very disturbing. I will not sugarcoat this. I know someone that during an episode of psychosis was arrested, found to be in possession. This person was admitted into Orchard House where they were treated, released, and on release they received a notice to attend a parish hall inquiry for possession. Did this person benefit from being sent to a parish hall inquiry after what they had been through? Did society benefit from putting this person through a parish hall inquiry because of the possession? Did it stop this person from using cannabis illegally again? Unfortunately, the answer to all these questions is no, it did not. People do not use cannabis thinking they will be caught, that it will have a bad effect on them. People do not use cannabis because it's illegal or not. Like most people, members of this assembly included, we use substances to help ourselves regulate. Sometimes we call this a crutch or a vice. How many members enjoy a glass of wine or a beer at the end of a hard day? How many members enjoy a cigarette? How many members enjoy something sugary just to get them through? Alcohol and cigarettes are proven to be worse for our health, alcohol worse for the society than cannabis, but both are still legal. It is my belief that we should change tactics, as the war on drugs has not worked. And the first step is to stop criminalising those who use cannabis. Bring our enforcement in line with our substance use strategy, offer people the support when they need it the most. And with that, sir, I make the proposition.